continuing our theme of carols and cookies for this season. Today's hymn is a modern one, Mary, Did You Know? And for our cookie today, we don't know what kind of cookie you're getting. It's a surprise. All the cookies are wrapped and you can't tell what you have until you grab it. So make sure you enjoy your surprise today. Because that's what today is all about. It was quite a few years ago. My nephew Logan is in college now. I think he's a junior at this point. But gosh, when he was born, that was probably when it was the first. I was the youngest in my family. It was the first baby I had any experience with. And I remember my sister telling me she was going to have a child. And then as we went through the process, you know, that was when her kidney failure began, because the pregnancy was putting so much pressure on her body. She started to fill up with water. There are actually pictures of her at her baby shower. And she hates all those pictures because she looks so puffy. And I say, Kathy, actually, you're someone who was actively dying. You look great. So Logan had to come into the world a bit early with one of those emergency C-sections that the hospital treats as if they're just, you know, we'll just do an emergency C-section, it'll be fine. Meanwhile, we're all sitting there going, an emergency C-section? Is that real? I mean, we're freaking out, you know. And as this time moves on, the baby finally got here. And, you know, he was ugly. I know we're not supposed to say that. And Lord knows I bet you wherever my sister is right now, she just sat straight up and went, no, he's not. I just know and she don't even know why, but she just said that, so wherever she is. But they're all red and splotchy and small, and newborns are gross. About 3 days later, they start to fill out and they look cute all of a sudden. But like that first few hours, it's a little iffy. You know, it's hard to find an ugly baby, but they're out there. Something happened. The family got to go into the NICU one at a time with my sister and the baby. We got to go in there one right after the other and see the baby for the first time. Of course, he was cute. He was little and small and helpless. And there he was in his little incubator, because again, he was a month early. And there's my sister, not looking her best. And something happened. I was the last one to go in, so Kathy, you know, it was time for the baby to rest and for Kathy to rest. So the nurse told us she had to take Kathy back to her room. And so she opened the little door of the incubator, and she said these words. Goodbye, baby, I'll be back soon. Mama loves you. And then she closed the little door. And I was shook to the very core of my being. Because it hit me really hard all of a sudden. She's a mother! My sister is a mother! Everything is just changed in a moment. I mean, I was literally shocked by those words. Mommy loves you. And that was not about like mom, that was about her. She loves the baby. And it blew my mind. And all of a sudden, you know, I found myself reevaluating and rethinking, okay, what does this mean? She's my sister, but she's also a mom. What exactly are the implications here? I can't figure it out. My brain is just going nuts. And as the story just kind of unfolded in front of us, everything changed in a moment. And we have this same kind of idea in the scriptures today. We have Elizabeth. Elizabeth has a husband by the name of Zechariah. And the scriptures record that they were not able to have children. We also know that Zechariah was a priest. That means he was of the tribe of Levi. That means he's probably a very high-ranking sort of person. But clearly he was not able to take a second wife to have a child. He has no children of his own. And he and his wife are in their old age. Wouldn't you know it, the angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah and says, your wife Elizabeth will be with child. And he says to the angel, but we're so old. How can we have a child in our old age? Now, has there ever been a person in Scripture who has said those exact same words? Abraham, right? Otherwise known as the father of the Jewish nation. Abraham and Sarah, same exact situation. They were old, they had had no children, and God comes to them and says, you will have a child. Zechariah should have remembered that story. As a priest, he probably should have known that frontwards, backwards, and sideways. And you can tell that the angel is quite displeased because he starts pulling out his resume. Excuse me, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a child. And because you're being such a ridiculous fool at this moment, you're not going to say anything for the next 9 months. Your mouth is closed, buddy. You just think about the fact that there were 5 other miraculous pregnancies in the Bible, one of which is exactly like yours. Seriously, dude. Zip it. And think about it for the next 9 months. And so Zechariah, who was standing in the middle of the temple presenting incense, runs out of the temple unable to speak for the next 9 months. And the child that Elizabeth is to have will be none other than John the Baptist. John the Baptist, who would preach in the spirit of Elijah. John the Baptist, who is to be the forerunner of the long-awaited Messiah. These people at this point have been waiting for over 400 years. The time between the Old Testament and the New, the time between the book of Malachi and the time between the book of Mark is 400 years they've been waiting. And so Zechariah and Elizabeth are with child. Pretty soon we have a similar situation where the angel Gabriel goes to Mary, right? And says, Mary, you also will be with child. You also are going to have a child. And Mary asks a very reasonable question, because nothing like this had ever happened in the history of the world. She tells Gabriel, Gabriel, you know what I'm supposed to do in order to have a baby? I haven't done that yet. Right? I'm not going to go any further than that, but that's the idea. And Gabriel acts in a very different way, doesn't he? He doesn't rebuke her for this. He's like, yes, I understand. But the child that you're to bear is to be the child of the Holy Spirit. God himself will cause this miraculous thing to happen. It's a very reasonable question. And in response, Mary is contrasted to Zechariah because she says, whatever you say, may it be to me as you have said. But here are the realities of her life situation. She is an unmarried woman at this point. To have a child out of wedlock meant that she could be stoned to death. She is taking incredible risk upon herself. She's currently engaged to a man named Joseph, a man who is most likely paid some kind of bride price on behalf of his family to basically purchase Mary from her family. And so if she finds herself pregnant, not by Joseph, then Joseph's family has every right to sue them down to their stockings and take everything they have. She's placing herself and her family in tremendous danger. And so is it any surprise then that she goes to the wisest people she knows? She flees to the Judean highlands to go and visit her cousin Elizabeth. And there she receives her response. As she walks into the room, she simply says, hello, Elizabeth. It says all she did is greet. She didn't tell them her story or anything. And all of a sudden, Elizabeth's baby leaps in her womb. And all of a sudden, Elizabeth knows through the Holy Spirit that Mary is the mother of the Messiah. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. May it be to me a marvelous thing that the mother of my Lord should come into my house this day. This actually is where we get, or where Roman Catholic people get the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed is the fruit of the womb. Came straight from the Gospel of Luke, actually. Straight from that text we read today. That's where they got it from, in case y'all are wondering. Straight from the Bible. And this moment where he hears the voice, all of a sudden, the family is filled not with dread and with fear, but with an unexpected and fearsome joy. She is surprised by the reality of God's story. She is surprised all of a sudden by this wonderful declaration by Elizabeth. All of a sudden we begin to see a moment where everything changed. In the same way my sister spoke in that hospital room and said, oh, Mommy loves you. Everything changes in a moment. And all of a sudden, Mary becomes safe. She knows God is with Elizabeth. God has testified to Elizabeth. I didn't even have to say anything. In this moment, she receives powerful and incredible assurance. You all know the story of my sister as it unfolds. I've talked about it before, about how the pregnancy and the wonders of having Logan in our lives has been a tremendous joy. But it would eventually lead to my sister's kidney failure, and it would eventually lead to the need for a kidney transplant, and it would eventually lead to her turning gray one day, and the fear that came of, can we get the kidney into her before this happens? And by the way, did y'all know they don't take out the other kidneys? They just shove a third one in there. Did y'all know that? I didn't either. Useless information, but there, it's ever on Jeopardy. And don't you think that there is this moment in the middle of all that where you have to look at the blessing and you have to look at the fears and the curses and you have to weigh them against each other. Mary was in tremendous danger. Joseph was in danger of losing his reputation. A lot of people were placed at risk, all because Mary wanted to be obedient to God. And I think that that is part of the story that we need to underline for us in our lives. Sometimes obedience to God means placing ourselves at some sort of risk. Sometimes saying yes means I don't get to do the things I need to do or want to do. Instead, I have to allow myself to take on the burden of something that I didn't want and didn't need. I think this season about my friend Linda Carter. Linda has invited into her home a woman who has a homeless woman, basically. And this homeless woman's son has come to stay with them as well, and she's done everything she can, and she's got them on their feet, and they've got their own apartment, and they now have a job. And I sit there and I think, as I live in my big parsonage, right? I sit there and think, gosh, would I do that? I mean, I got 6 or 7 empty rooms in this place, but would I do that? Would I be the person who, don't worry, Connie, I'm not ready to live in this. But if it were my own, if it were my own house, if I owned it, if it were my property to do with as I please, would I be that person that invited a homeless person to stay? Isn't that where the rubber meets the road? Isn't that where you're talking has to become action? Would I do it? I don't know, but a part of me wants to think, I don't think so. You know? Oh, that I would be more like Mary. I think the world would be a better place if we were more like Mary. If we were ready to say to God, yes, God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. If this is where you want me to go, I'll go. If this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. The closest I can come is my call to ministry. I remember sitting in seminary, doing my Hebrew class for the second time. I failed it the first time, y'all. I call it Hebrew, the sequel. It wasn't a sequel, though. It was just the same information over again. And let me tell you, as good as I am in ancient Greek, Hebrew is just deadly. It's like math. It is. It's like math. I've never seen a language like it. If this is present, then these things change. Oh, it's horrible. And it was the middle of the night. And I'm working, and I've got everything over my desk, and I've got 20 dictionaries and a commentary over here, and I've got my computer program up, and I'm looking, and I needed to look for something called a call and a nithal. There were 2 parts of speech. And I'm looking around, I'm trying to think, what is that nithal thing again? And I'm just going through my book, and it's 3:30 in the morning, and I look up and I thought, I wanted to be a Broadway actor. And now I'm looking up in the middle of the night, trying to look up a dead language that no one speaks, trying to discern what a nithal is. And you know what? I remembered it that night, but I don't remember it now. I don't remember what that is. But all because I said yes at some point to God's calling. My life took this change and this change of passage. Mary, did you know? And I want to think about this in a really broad and powerful way. After Jesus is born, after the Christmas story is told, Mary and Joseph bring the baby to the temple for what's called their dedication. It's sort of like receiving your birth certificate in a way. It's basically the family declaring that this child is a son of Israel. And so he has to go to the temple, and he's going to have his purification rite, and they're going to present an offering, which they offer 2 turtle doves for Jesus' purification, which is a sign that they were probably not wealthy people. Wealthy people would have paid for an entire lamb. They can only afford 2 turtle doves. And they go and they present it to the temple, and a prophet there, her name is Anna, comes up to them and knows that this is the Messiah. And they're receiving yet another confirmation about their story. Then another prophet named Simeon comes up, and he holds up the child, and he says, Lord, you now dismiss your servant to go in peace, for these eyes of mine have seen the Savior. Your son will cause the rising and falling of many people in Israel. And then he tells Mary this, and a sword will pierce your heart as well. She's going to have to watch, folks. She's going to be there as she watches her son writhe and die on the cross. She's going to see it face to face. She will be there right at the foot. I wonder if in those moments she thought about that moment that the angel Gabriel came to her. I wonder if she would sit there and think, wow, I put my whole life in jeopardy, and it all comes down to this. Now we know how the story ends. We have the benefit of knowing what happens on Easter. But she didn't. She just had to watch him suffer. I bet there was a moment halfway through that she probably looked up at, I don't know this for sure, but I bet there was a moment when she had to ask God, why is this happening? What is going on? Have we all been in that situation before? Where we look up to God and we're like, why is this happening? I did everything you said. I'm doing the best I can to be a good person. Why is this happening? Maybe we, like Mary, just need to be obedient. And maybe when we pull away from this story, and we're pulled away from the fabric and the tapestry of time, and we look at it the whole way, we can say, oh yeah, that's why that happened. That's why it all worked out this way. But the first thing for Mary is to say, yes. And that's our first thing too. Yes, God, put me to what thou wilt. Suffer me as thou wilt. Let me be lifted up for you. Let me be laid down for you. Let me be set aside for you. Let me be employed by you. Whatever it is, God, yes. And with that comes joy. Moments like this with Elizabeth. Moments where the baby leaps in the womb. Moments where we see God. Moments of transcendent glory. And with it comes cruciform moments as well. Moments where our whole life becomes cross-shaped and difficult and strugglesome. But no matter where you are on that passage and on that journey, we need to remember the promises of Christmas. The promise that God works together for good for all those who love Him. That the sign of Christ's birth is the sign of peace on earth and goodwill towards men. That God is actually in our corner. That God is actually fighting for us. Whether we're in our good times or our bad times, God is still looking out for you. There's joy in that. There's hope in that. There's wonderful and remarkable peace in that. A peace that defies understanding. I think about the people in the church throughout history. The people who said yes. The people who did what they were supposed to do. I think about the Mother Teresas. I think about the Lila Parkers. Yes, I'm putting them in the same league. That lady in my little home church who saw me sitting in the back row and wouldn't let me sit by myself. I think about the people in this room who said yes to God again and again. I think about the Masows and their work with the Royal Family Kids Camp. I think about Connie and the way that she's continually watching over the household of God so that everyone has a sanctuary. I think about the people in the choir who came in week after week to practice and to study. I think about all of you and the moments you say yes, what benefit, what marvelous truth will that express or change in the world? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. But I know that God is working something marvelous in our sight. God is doing something good, all because we said yes. So let's look forward to the surprises along the way. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.